Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I was in a silly mood, so I thought it's a good time to give a metaphysical episode. Something I find to be important, something that in one human being's vision has found to be significant, is that, today I am wondering about what is the future, or in some sense, the manifest destiny of the imagination, or I might probably even change the title to the future of the inner realms, but the imagination is the same. And so I thought about, to some degree, the species has imagined what can happen to its body, and then what would its vision be for what can happen to its mind, or why consciousness has access to an additional realm where abstraction can be considered as reality, to have some sort of reality. Something interesting about my experience of giving these talks is that the concepts I speak about, some part of me feels, the whole species will one day catch on to it. And so that gives me a feeling of permission to go beyond my to go beyond the geometry of how my mind simulates meaning and reality in the void. So let's say that we look at the idea, the future of imagination. I'll get into the subtitle later, what it relates. So what is the future of imagination? Let's say a human being is asked this question and they're really wondering about, what is an answer to this? Well, we think about the future of imagination kind of being like, what is the future? That's one question. And the other question is, what is imagination? And ultimately, the answer to this problem of to this idea of or let me say, a response to this view of what is the future of imagination, it is the relationship of the idea of the future. It's as if what role does the future play in the experience of imagination? And then the question is reversed: what role does the imagination play in the experience of the future? So imagination is something where it's honestly a silly word, the idea of imagination, right? But if we wanted to somehow, bring life to this idea of the imagination, let's to keep the word relevant, we can say imagination, poetically, playfully, can be considered as a nation of images behind the eyes of the individual. So it's like our question of what is the future of them, what is the future of imagination, to establish the concept of the future is it's like the person is like, what is imagination? Imagination is an inner event simultaneously present where there is an outer event, simultaneously present where the outer event takes place. You know, it's kind of undeniable, right? The nature of the mind is undeniable. We are like being considering ourselves that we are the periodic table on some deep existential level. And in some sense, like we are a part of the universe, and just the philosophical implication of being part of a universe brings up the question of to what degree we are a part of the universe. Like a raindrop being part of the ocean is literally the ocean. A human being part of the universe, could it imply that it's the whole universe? Could it imply that behind the names and the ideologies of what a human being is, it's actually the universe that is alive here? It's like the world never dies, but what in it does. You know? It's kind of like existence is acting like an eternal being through change. So, let's say there is a world. Ultimately, what consciousness is like the light of our minds, the candle flame of our minds has been lit, and our consciousness is in some sense illuminating an unconscious room. So it's kind of like an experiential light is converting darkness into content, darkness into form. Simply stated, before we even get to the idea of the future of imagination, we got to figure out what imagination is. We look at the world, we realize the initial position is in some sense conscious self in an unconscious world. Now, this relationship of a self in a world, it has a category where I would say it like this, that what we see in front of our eyes is our outer realms, and what we see behind our eyes is our inner realms. And what imagination is a conscious recognition of the inner realms. That's what imagination is. Imagination is an inner visual event. And some people are like, Mr. Within, but imagination isn't real. And I'll tell you, it's only 1/4 not real. Imagination, in comparison to what we're considering to be real, is 1/4 unreal. Okay? And why do I say 1/4? If you look at what the mind is doing, the mind is generating abstraction. The brain is simulating information into a world. You know, it's kind of bizarre. It's like we're a creature in a world where how we're being a creature is that our brain are receiving information from the world, and the representation of that information is like our personality. Like, it's very difficult for me to right now be like, okay, is my personality based on the conditions I'm found in, or is it based on my free will in those conditions? That means it's like how much of behavior is the actual intent of the free will, as long as there's a world here influencing us from the background. It's like impossible to tell how much of the free will's decision is actually the free will's decision. What I'm trying to say is that people called it imagination because the species was not ready to become responsible for a multidimensional perspective on reality. If somebody looked at human beings and they're like, okay, let's see how advanced these beings are, they would see that there has been human psychological states that it's like human beings are convinced by language that what they see is their only world. You know, that's the problem. It's kind of hilarious. It's like all the problems between human beings, all the, let's say, sparks of civil war inside the species. It's all because we think that there isn't enough room for multiple worlds to be meaningful. People think either it's true or false, either it never existed or is infinite, right? It's like as human beings, we have somehow not had the ability to utilize our collective existential position for a sort of accelerated infinite experience. You see, it's there are four corners to the mind. This is Mr.Withinian thought, what I'm saying here. What imagination is how the brain is happening. Okay, but it's how the brain is happening as something that has that is visible but not tangible, right? That's a quality about the nature of mind. The mind gives you, like, I'll give you an example. Whoever you are that's listening, for a second try to see some object that's in front of you. For example, my pen is on this table in front of me. If I was to close my eyes and visualize myself writing in just one instant, visualize myself writing, it would be as if existence happens. The echo of existence behind my eyes is an existence of its own. You see, this pen in front of me, the reason I'm saying is real is because there's a shape to it. It has a sort of substance and physical density, right? So in some sense, I can touch this pen and the pen has a shape. Now, if I close my eyes and visualize a pen, I can still see the shape of the inner event, but I cannot touch the shape of the inner realm. So the mind is kind of positioned in a way where we're like somebody sitting in a cinema looking at a movie screen. You know, it's kind of bizarre when our eyes are open, first person point of view through a biological evolutionary animal, but when we close our eyes, it's as if we're like somebody sitting somewhere they can't see. It's like somebody sitting in a dark room, and then whatever way your inner realms move, that's actually your imagination. It's kind of like the human psychology due to the geometry of the cosmos, which led to the development of dualistic psychology. It's like the endless loop of the presence of the sun, the presence of light, and the absence of light. It sculpted the brain of an evolutionary creature to reconsider dualism as the original. If somebody came up to me and said, Mr.Within, how many worlds can you build? In how many dimensions can you build worlds? And I would say there are 4 dimensions that I can see worlds where technically there are instantaneous beings. So what that means is think of life having 4 dimensions. And this is something I've designed, but I call it Ring of the Absent Heaven. But it's this system where reality, all of reality and conceptual reality is being seen, possible of being, it can be encapsulated in 0, 1, 2, infinity. These 4 symbols represent all the corners, the 4 dimensions that consciousness can do anything with. Right? So it's as if right now I can be a singular existential being, just this physical entity in space, right? A singular existential being. I can choose to be a dualistic experience of the singular existence, right? So I could choose to function in a dimension where everything is just one, and then I have the capability that's what the mind is doing, is that by experiencing its own existence, it's becoming a self-aware duality, right? A self-conscious duality is no longer a duality. you know. So if somebody said, Mr. Within, how many types of beings can you see based on the dimensions there are? I would say I can see a singular being, I can see a dualistic being, a dualistic entity, and I can see a void being, an empty being, and I can also see an infinite being. These four concepts, the void, the singularity, the duality, and the infinity, these four concepts encapsulate the edges of how man's mind has used knowledge to, journey into the skies so far. That means because I've understood these four states of experience, on some level, to some degree, it's like when nothing surprises the attention, even fear cannot exist. You see, it's like it's kind of like we're existing as this singular physical creature, but we experience our mind in regards to the up and down of our consciousness, based on the rhythms of our consciousness. So really what the experience of the mind is how the moment is divided into the concept and context. This is the entrance to the linguistic simulation, but it's also the exit. We're living at a time right now, guys, where ideological worship is denying human beings to get to experience the karma of their natural dimension of being. You see, it's like the desire of the human mind was an entrance into a dualistic world, but the presence of the moment was just a singular nature. You see, it's as if the person prays to God, and says, God, help me in this life. And then imagine God says, buddy, what do you think the soul is? Who do you think is living your life, And so it's like Swami Krishnananda, this yogic sage, says, religion is God remembering himself. So when somebody goes to understand their soul, it's as if they are choosing to enter the origin of all worlds. It's a state. Like if I was to, sort of poetically give us geometry to a celestial technology that exists in another dimension, how the human mind actually is that in another dimension it's like a sphere, right? Like in this dimension the body is like biological animal body, but let's say simultaneously there was another dimension to the moment where the person was existing as a sphere of light. That sphere of light is literally like the last staircase beyond being a sort of conceptual entity, right? Because karma is what happens to a shaped behavior. There's so many ways to think about the world. The more you add dimensions, the more your mind begins to see how every verb was a sort of universal observation. There were statues of gods, right, back in the day, where the god had three faces, and imagine somebody being like, yo, why does the statue of God have three faces? Like, why did this god have three faces? Like, let's say somebody's heard the idea of two-faced, but now they're hearing the idea of a three-faced god. And what the concept of God was really how the unknown moved the known. This might sound strange what I'm going to say, and I don't know if it's going to be controversial or not, but every religious person on the planet who is trying to act in accordance to an ideological, like a story of the, like I'm trying to say, if God is inconceivable, then to worship any concept, even the concept of God, is to not believe in God. You see, it's actually the state of disbelief. You know, it's like when religion says, you know what it is? It's like God is superior to any ideology, so human beings don't really need to act in accordance to an ideology. Do you know? What the world really needs and what the future of the imagination, it will most likely be on this planet, is that right now we have experienced strangely our individual physical life, and somehow the species is also experiencing a collective physical life. But now something is missing, right? It's as if there was a visible individual life and there was a visible collective life, and now the species, to attain a sort of supreme symmetrical, let's say, point of truth, it would be like what is missing from 2022 right now is that the species is ignoring how there is going to be a non-physical individual life and collective life. Our ancestors had realized the non-physical individual life, right? But their civilization hadn't developed for the opportunity of an incredible collective life, you know? You know, this is gonna sound like sort of anguish poetry, but I'll tell you, it's like being a mind in a world is like being in a wasteland of endless geometry. And when the free will chooses to engage the geometry of the moment, it's poetically like the movements of the soul. That means a person, a spiritual experience, a true spiritual person is kind of like someone who has experienced beyond the limits of objects and subjects, and the only way they can know their soul is by being it. You know, like this might sound strange, but the idea of the soul is not just a cool, like, you know, transcendental story, but what it is that it's what we can be. It's like consciousness has a physical activation. The physical life of the species is activated. Consciousness has a non-physical activation. The inner life of the species has been activated. Now, when we wonder about the future, we're like, okay, what's going to happen to our minds? So first, in the outcome of the body, pretty much there's 4 types of destinies, right, to the human species. That means extinction is one of the destiny probabilities. Think of as if I'm somebody discussing different ways the future can happen, right? And now I'm trying to explain the different ways the future can happen for what we consider as mind today. So physically, let's say, what are the options? There is extinction, a return to the void. That means intelligence returns to the void. There's another idea, which is, I would say, a singularity can take place, but this is different than a astrological or a technological idea of a singularity. It's more kind of like there may come a time where before our bodies go extinct, all human minds find a collective experiential server. Now, whether this is built by cyberspace, if the hidden purpose of cyberspace is to connect our imaginations, we don't know. But really what it is one state, the one destiny of the human species is that we realize we were never the human species and we were being everything as one. At once. So intelligence, being everything, has no longer a purpose for being. That means it's kind of hilarious when your everything has nothing to do, you know, but something has everything to do and nothing, you know. So singularity is intelligence returns to being everything. It's literally the opposite of the void. Okay? So think of it this way, that psychological oneness, like oneness, the experience of any sort of oneness, whether cyber or mystical, anytime a person experiences a oneness, it's a way where the boundaries of trust of the free will are expanding. So it's kind of like there's some people in the world who trust themselves and then they live in the world, and there's some people who trust the world and then live as a self that can trust it. You know, it's like you have to honor the mind that is here moving something in the middle of nowhere, right? Like that's where the true reverence of divinity occurs, when the unknown reveals to you that you are not a simulation when your eyes are viewing it. Right? It's as if our eyes are the proof of our divinity, how they move. Another possibility is that chaos and order endlessly continue. So imagine like the rise and fall of civilizations endlessly. Like even though our civilization may fail, there's another one coming up, there's another one coming up. And with the consideration, like look at how majestic the idea of the advanced civilization is, that if other planets pretty much chaos and order continue, which means an endless rise and fall. It's pretty much like chaos and order are dancing until the end of time. Like that could be a possibility. Right? So think of it this way, this would be a dualistic destiny to the human species, right? And then extinction is the void destiny, and oneness is kind of like a sort of singular destination, where in oneness there is no purpose because you're being everything. Like how can everything have a purpose when it's being everything, right? Right? People don't realize there's in mysticism, like in the future hopefully there's going to be schools of advanced communication everywhere. Like that's kind of like why I feel the idea of Mr.Within exists. Or a possibility is the concept of infinity, right? So what is infinite continuity for the mind is simultaneously in the future it could be some sort of biological or mechanical immortality. There we go, that's the word. So what does it mean? That means there is a possible destiny where our bodies become immortal, and so it's as if like, and the psychology of an immortal creature would be like this strange mind that has experienced so many geometric outcomes, karma of desire, that at some point it's like overused desire is like meaningless, you know, for an immortal being. Like for if we were to envision the psychology of an immortal being. You know, there's this very infamous quote you know, a passage from a poem from William Blake where he says, to see a world in a grain of sand or heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. You know, it's as if it's such a genius. Like, William Blake is, I think he's one of the most advanced human beings on this planet, like that has ever lived, potentially. But when he says to see a world in a grain of sand, he's saying to see all the potential dimensions there could be. And when he says or heaven in a wild flower, as if the present is its own paradise, and hold infinity in the palm of your hand, as if consciousness's relationship with its own infinite manifestation, and eternity in an hour. You know, it's as if in this passage, I mean, I may be looking into it a bit too much, but like, I think the main implication is that the limitless defines reality, not the limited. Because if our limitations define or design what they think the future deserves, it's going to be limited, right? Like the trick, let's say, problem to how we build an advanced civilization on Earth is kind of like, how do we get 8 billion creatures to seek their most advanced state? You see, when we wonder about what's the most advanced potential of an individual, based on where that individual is, their potential is suggested. You know, if we truly wonder about what the future deserves, we will discover the purpose of our imagination. Okay, what I'm trying to say is that it's a multidimensional world. And this, if you're a simple person, the basic multidimensionality of reality is how there are unknown moments and there's known moments. And the whole point of intelligence, like in the subtitle I've written, how do I say it? Why do memories exist? What purpose do they serve? As if like, why is the memory important at all? In contrast to a world where we can't see its edge. Pretty much it's like the game of humanity. It's like you're an unknown player in an unknown game, and how the free will moves suggests how you become known. It's kind of hilarious, but our decisions shape us not only in the outer realms, but also shape us in accordance to what we see, how we see ourselves in our inner realm, you know. The future of imagination is another way of saying, how will the inner vision, so imagine we're a species that can close its eyes and experience its memory, visualization, imagination as like inner events, inner films. So imagine the species realizes it's been watching inner films this whole time, and that's where thinking has been occurring. Through the discovery of an inner sight, one resets the context to what the meaning of life could be. What the imagination is like a human, is the brain's ability to generate abstraction. Now, because the brain is real, if the brain is moving, we consider its movement to also be real, but we're not considering the effect, the production of the brain as real. It's as if we're saying our brains are real, but what they're doing is unreal, right? So really what the future of the imagination is discovering that what we have been as a being, sure, our ancestors called it human, right? But what really this intelligence is a multi-present intelligence. That means as I'm existing physically, I am simultaneously non-physically, ideologically being an entity, right? So it's as if like it's like the question is consciousness, isn't consciousness the proof of a non-physical being? For me, I thought about the imagination and I'm like, yo, imagination is something we see but we can't touch, right? So it's as if we can have an emotion. Like a person could go, let's say a person is living a robotic life, and that means a life where nothing's new. Okay, so let's say a person's living a robotic life, and they close their eyes and they're super bored. Their life is super robotic. It's as if they're a gear in a machine, right? And so the person goes to sleep and they suddenly have a dream. And imagine they have a dream where they're flying in the clouds. And imagine a person who dreamed of flying in the clouds suddenly wakes up in his room, right? So imagine that person, he can say the dream wasn't real, I was imagining it, but what he saw and what was a psychological experience affected the free will. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like we're saying imagination is not real, but then we're like wiping our tears when we, see an incredible film. Do you know what I'm saying? Like what I'm saying is in some sense imagination is unreal to the first interpretation of reality we've had, but it is not unreal to itself. So I'm saying, like, we're like, yo, consciousness doesn't make sense. And I'm Mr.Within. It's like, okay, human species, if the story of your life doesn't make sense, we have to reset not just how the concepts are existing in the world, but we have to reset the value of the experiential context of every image that has been converted into language, to be claimed as knowledge. Because what kind of knowledge can we have in a changing world? What kind of knowledge can we have when we can't see the edge of the cosmos? Literally, the species doesn't have the technology for, right? It's as if there's real pride, right? And then there's a sort of artificial pride where the person is, in some sense, they look at, they're like, what can I be proud of when I look at the human species? And really, it's how far we can see. It's a concept of honor. Like back in the day, reality had a sort of pure grace to it, right? As if some people wondered, like, did our ancestors doubt themselves? And on some level, they couldn't, because how to be a human being is like such a new experience. It's like the unknown observer's connection to the known novelty of the realm. We are like, this might sound strange, but it's as if we are the breath of greater dimensions. It's literally the game of life. The future of imagination is the purpose of human vision. And I'm saying we have been living in a multidimensional way, but in society and as a collective, we just think we're physical entities, right? And I'm not saying we're not physical entities. I'm saying the way our behavior happens, if a dream can influence our behavior, if let's say poetry or a film can influence our behavior, it's another way of saying the behavior is not set, right? That means it's like we declared ourselves human in an unknown changing world too soon. Right? And it's not that we should be like, oh man, we shouldn't call ourselves human anymore. But I am saying, what is the purpose? What is moving everybody behind their eyes? And it's another way of saying, what is the mind doing in a world? And this is the remarkable realization. The purpose of the mind is to be the world. So the future of imagination is, in some sense, it's such a wild idea. Let me tell you why. Because we don't know how far existence is going to relate to our experience as beings. So imagine somebody got bored too quick and they were like, okay, I'm bored. of being a physical entity. And so let's say they became a cyber entity. And the person, let's say they said, I'm bored of being a cyber entity. It's as if, imagine all the ways the mind can simulate reality are different Iron Man suits of different lifetimes, you know? How different lifetimes are like different Iron Man suits. It's as if, like, what is the force behind the eyes that have discovered the unknown? What's going to happen is actually cyberspace is going to be how we enter our imagination. The chapters to the human destiny. The void was here first. Everybody's been nothing before they were something. When it comes to the singularity, everything in existence is just existing. You know, existence is just being existence, just like the color blue is its own meaning, right? It's like existence is just being. Right, it's kind of remarkable. There's a way the world is happening, and there's a way our body is happening, but there is a way that our mind is happening that is different. It's kind of like we're using abstraction to generate reality. As if the reality is dualistic, it means it's always dependent on its contrast. So that means if I say I'm a temporary being right now, it's as if the only way I can say that is because the concept of eternity already exists. You know, it's kind of like I'm saying before, somebody can be like, yo, this is a good person, this is a bad person. The concept of good and bad need to exist at the same time. So the moment I consider an outer realm, there's an inner realm. The moment I consider like above my head is up, then there's like below is down. Do you see? It's like the mind is like a singular point of attention, and all our experiences of reality are kind of like what sort of axis has intersected the present. It's kind of like the brain in the most energy reserving way of its function is actually just trying to be. Right? It's kind of like, imagine a shape doesn't know what shape to change into, so its greatest strategy is to just remain as a shape, you know. But the adventure that is found through the notion of an idea, right? Like some people in the New Age community, they think the idea of an ego is like, how dare you have an ego? Are you a fool? In the world of truth, right? They think the ego is the source of the problem. But the source of the problem is not an ego. The ego is just an archetype. The source of the problem is how far consciousness has explored its moment. You know, I'm saying, like, we have astronauts in outer space, and we have ancient yogis and mystics all over the planet going into the inner space. All right? Like, we can have this view that biology happened, let's say, in a horizontal physical dimension, right? But what the mind was, it's kind of like the machine had its own architecture and the spirit had its own intelligence. You know, it's like it's kind of like, it's very hard to say if the body is like born from this dimension, but the mind is like entering a reality. It's like a vertical dimension is entering a horizontal dimension. You know, and that intersection is being the mind. So it's kind of like, just we have the idea, as Plato would say, as above, so below. Poetically, our eyes are from another world, you know, but that world is the unknown. You know, if imagination is an inner model of reality, if the person acts upon their imagination is converted into reality. So when I speak, it's kind of like that's when the ideas behind my eyes are kind of like becoming words in the linguistic reality, you know. Language can be seen as a dimension, you know, that we are holding identity in. Everything can be considered to be real and unreal at any time, you know. The nature of the mind is that it's playful. It's kind of like, what is the purpose of energy? Or if a scientist wanted to understand like the cheerfulness of happy people on the planet and like why evolution had come to that state of mind. It's all about what vision the soul trusts in. You know, human beings don't realize our true nature could be a dehumanized state of being. It doesn't mean there is no value to the human being, right? Like, you know, the future of the imagination is just the realization that imagination was the presence of our consciousness in another dimension. Like if a person closes their eyes, they visualize something or they say something, it's as if like the attribution given to what is intelligence is what is being the moment to move the moment. So based on what kind of beings there will be in the future of imagination is kind of decided, right? There could be a point where imagine like people could connect their minds. Not just through language, like getting to know each other, but imagine people could connect their minds or connect their inner realms instantly, right? Imagine there was a war between two countries, okay? And just to maintain the empathy level, the United Nations had let's say, hired this next level, like cyberspace company, right? And somehow it's like, let's say people in a country where war was happening, their minds and psychologies and the intensities they go through could be broadcasted to, let's say, a collective mind server, right? What I'm trying to say is right now we have the privilege of being an individual biological entity, body, and having a sort of, let's say, unknown natural mind, okay? But in the future, because language is an unnatural technology, it's another way of saying an unnatural destiny is involved. That means the only way to just be purely natural in the future is we have to renounce duality, but that's probably not gonna happen, you know. You know, it's as if, what are the chances of everybody suddenly having one emotion all the time? It's impossible. The world is designed as if literally like the best strategy human beings can get, like the idea of the advanced civilization is something that, believe it or not, even bees, like the insects, understand. Human beings can learn from bees how to build an advanced civilization, right? Imagine in the future we have a hexagonal, like, advanced civilization. Like, this might sound bizarre, but imagine, like, just like the bees enter a giant beehive, which is a reality of their own creation. It's another way of saying how far, you know, will the geometry of the human mind go? For how long in history and this journey through time are we going to remain human? I would say probably after like 3,600 or 4,000 years, there's going to come an opportunity to no longer be a shaped entity. Like literally everybody's going to have that choice. But that's like 3,600 years from now. Why? Because there's certain things that already are, there's certain systems alive in the moment that they already have a karma, you know? It's as if some people would, like in a lot of movies, let's say people see like the bad guy being victorious and they're like, man, that bad guy had better karma than the good guy, you know? Right? And on some level, one can see the concept of destiny as if it doesn't matter how good or bad the person was, there was a reason for their continuity in the film of reality. To be an existential creature is like you're in the film of reality. We have to, hilariously, just like bees, trying to build the beehive, the human species needs to step out of its inner realms, experience the outer realms, and then realize that even though it's in the outer realms, it has access to the inner realms, and then wonder about, okay, what is the purpose that my moment of mind gives to any sort of vision it gets. That means imagination is a subtler dimension of a state of being, and so it's like in that state of being there's information, so it's a person realizing there is subtler dimensions to information. The nature of the mind is that it can we can call it the instantaneous eternity principle. In any moment the mind can choose to see infinite continuity. I'll be right back, guys. An argument can be made that the imagination is the future, or the idea of the future is how our minds are moving before our bodies. So pretty much it's like how are our minds gonna move in the future. They can move individually, they can move dualistically, they can move infinitely, or they can stop their movement, which is to become void. You know, if someone was to wonder, are there any people on Earth who have tried actually to be nothing? And it's as if Zen masters kind of are those people. And what is the Zen master doing? Realizing the nature of the object is empty. That means the meaning of life is like a movement of mind. But, you know, the shape of the life is to some degree based on the body's performance. The future of imagination is how imagination also designs the future. What is really the future, or what has been the future to past generations, is just doing things that have never been done before. To extract designs from reality that has been never perceived before. It's like, what's the most advanced thing a known being can do? It's like access infinite knowledge. And then what's the most advanced thing an unknown being can do? Access unknown knowledge. Pretty much, guys, the future of imagination is the destiny of our minds. The destiny of our minds is how free will from the present chooses to pilot through dimensions of reality. If one was to follow a Descartesian mind-body dualism, the mind is the presence of reality in another dimension. The advancement of the inner realms is pretty much how two dimensions synchronize to discover their greatest result. It's as if the ideas of imagination and the idea of the future, they are Their destinies, their pathways for a creature of mind. If in the future we don't identify as anything in reality, it would be as if like we would be the space where everything's happening, and that space is beyond the human framework. That means the destiny of it's like the question is, how long can the species physically continue in reality and in a world, and how long can a species psychologically continue? Sometimes, and I was thinking of like an interesting metaphor, a metaphor of kind of like the world being like an art gallery we've entered for the first time. The human intelligence can appreciate the beauty of shape, space, color. It's like our mind is non-physically moving our body as the space of the body, and our body is, physically moving us as to share the mind's life. And to think about consciousness is like to wonder who the thinker is. It's like all stories of reality bring us to a moment where an unknown viewer is present in a known world. To discover the unknown behind your eyes is to realize you have been it. Right, we're reaching that point in history where we're realizing like we're an unknown being before we were a human being, before language became the edge of our reality. Unknown eyes, were their own worlds. Consciousness it's kind of difficult to wonder if there's actually a soul, or is everything the soul of the universe happening. It's as if God is an inconceivable idea, but the soul comes from God. So it's as if the spirit that moves man is like an inconceivable force. Pretty much the species has to find the courage to go beyond the dualistic human archetype and to wonder about how many different ways the world could happen that it's not happening right now. Right? We pretty much, it's like what the world needs is not people of specific professions, but it needs people who have in some sense cared for the most efficient vision. Right? It's as if an advanced life awaits, but in order for us to access the advanced life, we have to be advanced individuals. And to be an advanced individual means how far is the vision that moves the mind? How far is your vision, pretty much? It's kind of like knowledge is a way of knowledge is like man's strategy to make sense out of the void. You know, there's no reason for consciousness actually. Consciousness is more like a transcendental intervention in our reality rather than something that is just from the animal. It's like the body is an antenna, but consciousness is the signal that finds itself passing through the antenna. Do you know? It's as if what is the spirit of life? The spirit of life when we are solar powered psychological entities. Like this, our sight is solar powered, right? It's like it's the quality of our vision, right? It's like the idea of an advanced civilization is like a suggestion that do we want to experience the world in HD or is it just in low resolution? It's like 2022 where it's the low resolution human species, you know? You know, imagine all ideological systems realize that before a story had to become the world is just being here in an unknown way. Once we become content with the unknown, then knowledge can move in a new way. The imagination can become a cyber entrance into a sort of immortal psychological reality. Like it's pretty much like human consciousness is like this energy, and then it's like, okay, where's this energy gonna go? Right, and the person begins to realize from the dimensions of the sovereignty of their own mind. So it's as if every person, there's a way where they're individual based on how their concept of individualism is separating from the world. But it's as if every person has a sort of nature in what the in what their first psychological impulse is when attention and existence meet. Right, like there's a force, like the consciousness is like this, it's like this invisible force where it's like the human's energy is the whole moment's energy. I don't know how to say it, but it's like it's pretty much like what does the free will do? Imagination is like an inner realm. Cyberspace is going to be a bridge between the inner realm and the outer realms. Like if we choose to live more as minds, we're going to go to an era of collective mindhood. If we choose to live as bodies, we're trying to preserve the natural duality for as long as possible. You know, life is really like how when the brain simulates a world, it also has to get to see how that world exits, you know? So the challenge of building an advanced civilization is like, what is the most advanced approach to a civilization that can fail, that can go to that get extinct? And it's to have this view, what would a world without extinction look like? So I can see that technology is going to reach the level of nature, and nature is going to surpass its own level, you know. So there's going to come a point where technology is going to be able to create machines may be capable of creating trees that through nanotechnology that behave exactly like a natural tree. Who knows? The future is going to be really advanced. All I'm saying is to try to get everybody who's alive in 2022 and onwards to kind of be like, okay, let's look at what the most advanced possibility of reality is. And I think there's a hidden purpose to why everybody has a different DNA and everybody's eyes are like a character in a story that their memories only know, right? So that's accessible to only them. It's like our mind is a private world, you know. And when I'm giving these talks, it's like something from my private vision of reality is entering, let's say, the public vision of reality. Pretty much, language is like an arrow, right? And being a communicator is like being an archer, right? And ultimately it could be seen also as like, okay, we are piloting our attention, and we're in what sort of plane of existence are we going to pilot through. I think deep down what the soul is how everybody knows deep down their consciousness is how their whole moment is happening, right? Like that goes beyond the human idea. The human idea is part of the moment. So it's kind of like in an unknown way, we're actually, our consciousness seems to be eternal in an unknown way. But in a known way, it's temporary through, let's say, the positioning of the biological body. So I'm saying, what happens to human consciousness when the human being realizes they are not their name? Like when you realize like it's everything that we are is just the choice of our action, you know? It's as if victory was how it's like how the Zen masters would say, it's like some people climb a mountain by starting at the top, you know? Or the best way to climb a mountain is to start at the top. So I'm thinking, okay, the best way to start an advanced civilization is to reach the top of an advanced civilization, is to actually to be on the top of the mountain from the beginning. So I'm having this view that to be a human being is the most advanced thing that's happening in this part of the universe. Like there is a cosmic honor to being a human being that transcends cultural judgment. What is a human being but a space of mind? What is a space of mind but the administrator of the free will? Right, the free will is administering the state of mind. What is the free will? It's in some sense attention internally tunneling through simulations of the brain in every moment. You know, consciousness will be unknown as long as reality is dualistic. It's like it's easy to say our bodies are individual because we're like evolutionary animals, but I'm saying at the same time, it's not easy to say if our minds are individual. That means it's like what consciousness is doing is getting access to its own self-simulated information and the actual information of the world. Right, and so it's like the brain is using a self-simulating strategy to constantly figure out what is real and what is unreal. So the brain is acting like an evolution is like a something the creature's doing that is on a genius level. Right, as if it's like a genetical program trying to pass the test of time, but it can only do it if it adjusts its reality. To be a genetical being is to like be in an obstacle course, Do you know what I'm saying? It's like it's like Ninja Warrior, you know. How many different ways can a person like go through life, you know? Imagine like two eternal beings were having a chat, and one eternal being was like, man, I've lived through 7,500 apocalypses, man. You know, I've reincarnated at that many times, man. It's like, I'm bored, what should I do? And imagine the other eternal being says, it's like you're still reincarnating. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like the idea is that what is the distance between the unknown viewer and truth? And if that distance is a concept, it means your view on life is dualistic. If that truth is an experience, it means you're a sort of singular existentialist. Think of the concept of the void, the singular, the dual, and the infinite being psychological modalities. You know, ways that the mind can choose to be a relationship in the moment. What the inner realms is pretty much how will human beings live in a way where their most advanced effort could be presented before there is no longer a humanity. It's as if, what do we do with the humanity that's just here? Right? What do we do in the middle of nowhere? And this is where the philosopher comes into the situation and says, hey, everybody who believes you're in one physical world, the nature of the mind is that our emotions and our character is being influenced by outer realm physical existential information, and in some sense psychological like an inner realm information. So what I'm trying to say is a dream changes a person's character, gives them an experience. At the same time, they wake up and they're in existence, and they can go through an experience. And I'm saying both of it affect the individual. So it's as if the species can't lie to itself that it's always had a hidden life, you know? As if the mind was the portal where the body realized on the other side everything is soul, you know? What the soul is like how the universe is being. Our memories are here so that intelligence can be a response to a changing world. Consciousness is how our mind is choosing where the edge of its own world is. It's kind of like behind the physical life, there's an abstract life taking place. It's very hard to say if the mind is abstraction or if abstraction is just how the mind is being, you know? Like what the mind is access to an additional dimension of information. Without a mind, we can't experience duality. It's as if consciousness didn't start as a self in a world, there would be no purpose to the world. would say the future of imagination, people are going to be living in their imaginations through cyberspace interpretations of their own imagination. In the future we might see like the wealthiest people on the planet be realize in cyberspace they can live like gods, and imagine like the dictator of a country being like, okay, I'll just go dictate my own country, I'll go be a god of my own world in cyberspace, and I'll leave like a nation alone. The future is based on what we allowed, based on how we valued freedom. If we want to have the freedom of a multidimensional being, it means the psychology of the moment can have multiple ways to occur. A person can see themselves as an ideological character in a story. A person can just see them see themselves as a singular existential event. The person can see the mind as a sort of like where infinity lives. And the soul is like how consciousness was never here. It's all about how far we choose to be an individual biological entity. The destiny of humanity is based on how much we protect the idea that we are natural biological being. And in some sense, could our desire for immortality turn us into a technological entity? That means in the future, are we going to have robots acting like human beings, or human beings living alongside robots? We don't know. We don't know how much of right now we're just like this unknown, let's say, traveler as consciousness going through a lifetime of a biological organism. But in the future, we don't know in what sort of relationships cyberspace will have with the human being, right? Like some people could just spend their lives in a live stream version, cyberspace version of reality. The thing about the future is that the species has to have the courage to acknowledge that its current view could be incomplete. Right? It's like a sort of global, like there was a global ignorance, but now the realization of that global ignorance leads to global humility. So what that means is every person on the planet needs to have a tolerance how we are unknown beings, and our activity makes us known to ourselves and to the world. Do you know? It's all about what are we going to do with consciousness, and then the idea of the human being. The idea of the human being can exist in language. It can exist in a dimension of just pure geometry. It can exist in a physical world, in a physical nature. The idea of the human being can exist in the void. It can exist, let's say, in the inner realms, the outer realms. What the idea of the human being is like how this unknown energy becomes a conscious, like how consciousness, by trusting its free will, becomes part of how the world is moving. It's like consciousness was privatized only for our inner realms, and now that consciousness is also rising to the inner realms. So it's another way of saying, how is my body projecting my mind, and then how is free will being how my mind projects my body. That's what free will is. Free will is an abstract idea moving an object. It's like literally who we are as a subject. Like that's where psychology is starting, the character in the story. A subjective character in a story is being our ego right now. You know? Ultimately what it is I think there is something known as the spirit of advancement. And for some reason, the spirit of advancement is coinciding with the rising of a civilization, right? So imagine civilizations rise and fall, and then there's this unique event happening, and our civilization has risen in that unique event. So right now, every person should suddenly feel as if they are in the presence of the greatest kingdom of humanity. Okay, and when I say kingdom, I'm not saying it in an egotistical way. I'm saying like we have the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom. Do you know? So we have also the human kingdom, right? I'm trying to use the idea that we're all part of the same species as the union point for the attention of the species to now advance towards probabilities of its future. Right? It's as if the person suffered and they're like, okay, that explained the purpose of my past, and then the person suddenly wonders what is beyond suffering, and what is beyond suffering is a sort of unconditional novelty. That means it's like something so new that it can't have a concept. Right? Advancement is like how the honesty of one dimension accelerates towards the inconceivable. So really what is happening to the mind is that the mind is testing to see the limits of its own existence. And what the mind is a space where ultimately there's something that's aware, like when we say my body, my mind, so that that's owning the body and the soul at the same time is actually how consciousness is being the whole moment. So really the secrets of the greater dimensions of reality is how our minds are being the space where they're moving in, not just what's moving in it in this space, you know. So it depends, you know, the future of imagination could be a state where we don't need it, right? You know, or it could be like a sort of resolution, right? Like who knows, like after biological human beings have tried to live as long as they can, who knows, like after human extinction maybe there's technological continuity. Like it's very hard to say if in the future there's going to, again, this might be, I might be re-emphasizing this, but it's like in the future there's going to be either you know, robots acting like human beings, you know, or there's still human beings even able to be here. To be a biological organism, it's kind of like to be a creature in a habitat. And if we take away the humanity of civilization, it's like taking away a psychological habitat of how we're being people in a world, you know. It's kind of like hilarious, you know. Consciousness is like, what do I do with a changing world? Like, what does energy do in a changing world? And it's as if, what do we do when we have experienced all dimensions of our being? Like, what kind of being would be a being that has experienced all dimensions of being? It would be a being where the concept of separation would no longer exist. You see, it's the level of the mind. What the mind is how an unknown viewer or an unknown witness, okay, witnessing force or intelligence is using an inner simulation. It's as if poetically the soul is using the mind to move the body before the body moves. And then what free will is the soul trusting its own geometry, you know. The mysteries of reality surpass our feelings, you know. You know, it's remarkable because when we realize we actually don't know what we're being, that's the only time where we can actually know it. You know, the mind is like an unknown ability, and the future of it depends on what we do with this ability. We have this ability to see probabilities of the future. Like the mind is like living lifetimes ahead of the body. And that's just like poetically the power of imagination in one moment. In an instant, a person can fathom, like, you know, like thousands of birds in the sky, you know. The mind is literally, it's not the world, it's what's holding the world. That's really what consciousness is. Consciousness is like an unknown intelligence is holding on to a known world. Now the question comes, why is attention even here? Why are the eyes even open? And what is the destiny of the human species? Is the destiny of the human species a sort of androgynous, mechanical sort of immortality? Or is the destiny of humanity something that has understood the value of nature but has also understood the advantage of technology? Right? Pretty much the purpose of technology is like the legend of the invention of all inventions. The greatest invention it's the greatest invention an inventor could create is an invention that keeps creating inventions, you know. To create an invention that is the inventor is like the greatest thing an inventor can do. Because ultimately our personalities are like the question of like what sort of world is this person walking in, right? Like when we look at reality, we have a sort of outline for it, but when we look at human psychology, there's so many different ways that people are looking at the world that if they just stay true to what they're seeing, they automatically activate like endless skills, you know. There's something about the nature of a dualistic reality that the person's always caught in like the truth and false, you know. So anybody who's looking for truth, duality, they're still in a dualistic simulation. It's just the mysteries of our intelligence. It's as if we thought we were just this foolish animal, right? And we realized no, we are a genius potential of how awareness holds the moment becomes its own greatest invention. Our memories are like how a genetical program suddenly has noticed itself, and it's noticed itself because it can compare who it was before it was who it would be, do you know? When I think about like why do memories exist, and I realize because what are memories? Memories are geometry that the brain still holds on to. But what the brain is a multiple presence. Okay, so it's like right now as I'm being physically existing, my mind is like dualistically experiencing, right? But poetically my soul is being where all of this is happening. Right, it's as if the eyes of man are rooted in the timeless, but there's still a reality there, right? You know, it's like if somebody says, Mr.Within, how could there be a world, a reality in an unconditional universe? And it would be a way of saying in an unconditional world. It would be like everything is truth, and because everything is truth, there's nothing else to be. If we were right now perfect beings, there would be no need to update anymore, right? If everybody was just like, do you know what I'm saying? I'm saying like the mind gives us access to, the mind is like a parallel reality, okay? The mind is a multiverse. The mind is behaving like it's in a multiverse because you can instantly remember yesterday's universe, you know? The mind is behaving, the mind is in a multiverse, but the body is in a universe, in one universe. Like universe, you know? You know, they asked the scientist, you know, what do you identify as? And, you know, the scientist was like, should I read the periodic table for you? Like... It's like I could totally see a like passionate chemist giving a speech to millions, which the speech is just him shouting the elements of the periodic table. You know? You know, let me tell you, what is the simple thing that if readjusted, it becomes advancement for the species? Every human being harbors a potential. Every human being is like a version of the world. Their consciousness is existing in a sort of spherical simulation, okay? So if I look at somewhere and I'm like, I don't like this place, that's a simulation of mind. Or if I say I like it, but when I don't have an opinion and I just look at reality, I discover a sort of a non-dualistic silence behind every sound, you know, a sort of stillness behind every movement. And what we know is that consciousness is the awareness to movement and stillness at the same time. The brain is like has mastered dualism, but the mind has still room to, in some sense, move towards the singular, remain as the singular, or become infinite, you know? Because really what survival of a species means is like an attempted biological immortality. That's really what it is. Like we're creatures that fear the unknown. Because we fear the unknown, we're like, how long can we keep the program of knowledge running, right? But in reality, it's kind of like from an unknown state, a known creature has arose. This known creature has a performance opportunity, and then suddenly the known creature enters the unknown. It's like, little does everybody know, like, what consciousness is using existence as a preparation for returning to the unknown. It's like what the mind is doing is trying to know what the body is, you know? Who we are behind our eyes is not an object or a subject, it's an awareness to both simultaneously. This is how we know. It's like, how do we know we're not a body? Because we have minds. Okay, how do we know we're a mind? Then that's poetically where the unknown self or the soul is. So it's like a person's character in the future will be based not on just what they know, like how they responded to what they know, but how they responded to what they didn't know, right? So that's why I'm saying we change this idea of like teacher-student archetype to everybody's an explorer of the advancement of humanity. You know, it's kind of like some people, it's like how Shakespeare says, you know. Shakespeare says some people are born great, some people achieve greatness, and some people have greatness thrust upon them. And what does that mean? That means it's the responsibility level of how far conscious sight has gone. It's like every person's mind is like a telescope, okay? And how they use to see through their mind how the nature of reality is occurring. It's as if in the future everybody's going to be writing journals on how their intelligence is happening. right now, like, let's say capitalistic culture has clothed itself with the artificial, okay? But I'm saying, imagine everybody on the planet felt the species deserves the most advanced possible, this greatest decision. You know, and the greatest decision would not be to choose one dimension over another dimension, but to, in some sense, have a strategy where the way we are living is attending to all dimensions of being. Because to be a human being is how the attention moved in a moment. The presence of our attention is the secret door of the heavens, you know? Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. The future of the imagination, like we're imagining the future, it's kind of like the future of imagination is saying like the future of water in an ocean, you know. It's all based on the currents, you know. We have to trust the world because in some sense there's never a reason not to trust reality. Because we're alive once, we're like, what's the point of a creature attaining consciousness and being alive and being able to experience the world, but not trusting the world? Like, what's the point of the evolution, you know? So in some sense, we have to trust what we are being, but we must also be considerate that in any moment of our life, we can cultivate more angles of perception to any moment. So any moment, like if somebody has a problem, their problem is a geometrical shape in the moment. So there's many ways, many angles the mind can approach, you know. They call this to some degree equifinality. Honesty to how consciousness is present is the access point to one's true nature. So imagine you were a being that wanted to be advanced in all dimensions, so you had to trust the expression of the moment in all dimensions, right? It would be another way of saying we are so the future generations are going to be so fearless that and so instantaneously, like right now, let's say if there's a speed to how human beings are understanding new moments, the future generations are going to have like higher cultivation levels, right? Because what is evolution been through the notion of a civilization is that it's like human beings have elevated from an animalistic entity into, in some sense, this idea of the civilized human being, right? It's our civilized behavior that keeps us human in civilization. Right, but our civilized behavior, it had like now on the planet in 2022, there needs to come not a sort of it's like a review of the future, right? It's as if every person on the planet is like, okay, I've experienced the past, I'm just being in the present, then what's the grand vision of everything, right? It's the quality of how reality will be experienced in the future. You know, it's kind of like every person on the planet just starts walking towards the most advanced civilization that their mind can fathom, and in some sense, in the middle of it, we see 8 billion human beings are living in advanced ways, right? It's just the ability to observe multiple dimensions at the same time, which frees us to experience anything in those dimensions. So in some sense, cultivate realizations about how your mind is literally being a state of perception, right? People don't realize it, but like writing is next level, like inner realm healing. Like I'm telling you, nothing heals the mind better than writing. Writing is like the ultimate medicine of the mind. You know, it's where the inner realms can experience through a linguistic dimension. You know, Like, I could say I'm not like on an air level, airbender level, like airbender archetype level, but I could like lift a cup of coffee in the air, and it's like I lifted like the elements of the world in there. Am I an airbender for lifting a coffee cup in the air? I don't know. It's just reality projects itself in multiple ways, and what do we do with it, right? What do we do with the past, the present, and the future? The present is just being there. The past already happened. It's just an information archive, and it's literally like, what does this unknown attention in the present do with the past, in the present, right? So it's literally, we use the past to build probabilities of the future. We literally convert all inefficiency on the planet and put it in a context of an efficient vision. You know what that means? That means that advanced civilization in our inner realms has already happened. It's another way of saying our minds are already poetically in the advanced civilization the moment we envision it, right? So it's like behind our eyes, the advanced civilization is just how consciousness holds the moment, But in front of our eyes, an advanced civilization is literally, imagine every person was a series of self-simulations throughout the day. And so it's as if, okay, these self-simulations, what was the contribution of energy moving as a self? Right? So for me, I was like, okay, if I want to be the most advanced self, like imagine somebody has an ego, they're like, how can I be the most advanced self? So imagine somebody wondering about how can I be the most advanced self, realizing the most advanced self, it can only be the most advanced self if it's in the most advanced world. Right? So an advanced civilization is like that urge poetically in the soul, mind, and body of man. Right, that in some sense is in some sense looking for the beyond. It's there's like it's as if the light in our eyes wasn't enough. The vision of our reality wasn't enough, so mankind decided to advance its inner technologies rather than just outer technologies. We need to have the imagination of all human beings activate, but not in the sense that they think their imagination is reality. Right? So in some sense, we need an advanced humanity that has a capability to discriminate between what is an inner event and what is an outer event. Right? When this capability is restored, then in some sense what happens in civilization is we station the human idea as the opportunity of an unknown intelligence to experience the dimension that is the human position. To be a human being is like to be a space that's looking at itself. It's how the limitation, a limitation in existence had capability to notice it's a limitation, right? Imagine like pretty much what it is an advanced civilization is like a command. It's like the future is giving a command to the present that if you want to see the most advanced world, you have to be the most advanced being. So every human being in their life, it's like their spirituality shifts away from hidden truths of other dimensions and becomes, it's as if when being a human being becomes the most divine experience, then the idea of the advanced civilization is the most divine action. In some religions, they attribute God to the concept of greatness, right? And the idea of the advanced civilization, poetically, if you're religious hearing me, it's like, what's the greatest creation of the creation of God? And the recommendation is honesty. And what does honesty mean? Honesty means everybody's being a new human being on the planet for the first time. So literally, we're like unknown beings. And knowledge is just helping us know. I don't know. There seems to be mysteries to the moment that cannot convince the consciousness to be assured of its shape. What the soul is how space had an opportunity to move matter. The secret behind our eyes is how our future is beyond time. You know, Plato kind of gave it away. He said time is the moving of image of eternity, and we are creatures lost in time. We are creatures, like, you know, just like they say, it's kind of bizarre, like from an evolutionary perspective, to wonder why did the human species, like as an unconscious evolutionary creature, suddenly attain consciousness of its own suffering. It's as if did we become conscious just to experience the suffering of being a temporary biological animal, and then we realized no, we became conscious to notice beyond the program of instinct. There seems to be an unknown flow to the mind. It's as if the person thought the spirit world was somewhere else, you know? The truth, it's like truth cannot hide itself from itself. You know, that's the secret of the soul. It is God's confidence. In the future, there's going to be interfaces. That means people, it's literally like what sort of face we give to the voice of our mind. In the future, that face, it's like what was the logos where Heraclitus was like experiencing as an inner voice, right? In the future, it could just be like something like Jarvis from Tony Man. What am I saying, Tony Man? Tony Stark from Iron Man. You know. So what is the idea of Jarvis? It's the idea of AI becoming conscious, a conscious assistant to the biological conscious agency of the human being. Let's say there's a possibility of a future where superintelligence, super intelligent computers and AI, they in some sense become man's best friend. Imagine cyberspace doesn't become a trap, right? It's like, what does a being do that has realized the infinite ability of context and concepts to change till the end of time? What do we do when we find ourselves being the sky of our world, you know? All I can think of is advancement, guys. I've thought about this so many times, and I'm like, what's the best thing creatures can do in the middle of nowhere? And it's advancement, but advancement on all levels, right? As if what was the great vision that, let's say, advanced the kingdom of humanity? And it was this vision that we get to see our potential before the curtains are pulled. That's the greatest motivation. It's like, what is the mortal performance, you know, for eternity's timeless observance, you know? It's like, who were we before we were nothing, right? Before we were not here, right? It's like we're all present. We've all logged into the conscious waking state. And throughout the day, we live in accordance to the rhythm of our visions, right? But to have a moment where the person just sits for a moment, still and silent, and just presses pause on the story of life. And then when you get to experience the presence of the unknown, you'll discover the mind's freedom is different than the body's freedom. The mind has a freedom to conceive itself not as a body, but the body doesn't have that privilege, right? And so it's as if the consciousness reaches a point where the person wondered about how they will meet the future, but then their consciousness shifts to a point where they are waiting for the future. It's kind of strange, but it's like very poetic that consciousness is waiting for its future. That what all human beings have been doing is waiting for the future, and being alive is an ability to participate in the future of a species, you know? It's like by just existing, we're making human history by being the humanity on Earth. Now it's the coordination of our action, you know? An era of advanced teams is going to arise. Like there's going to be a point in the future where incredible visionaries are going to team up, and the idea is we're living in that chapter of history where we're advancing communication. The next chapter is in some sense a sort of geometrical revolution. Right, so right now we're human beings in history alive in the language revolution, but let's say in the future they're going to be alive in the geometrical revolution. And beyond the geometrical revolution, they're going to be alive in the cyber revolution. And there's stages beyond that, but these are the fascinating points that are going to shift the nature of human experience. When technology allows collective mind to, that would be a strange era. That would be an era where human behavior is not going, it's like it would be impossible to behave in accordance to nature if the person is experiencing the information of an unnatural world, you know? There is going to come a chapter in history where I shouldn't say it's going to come, but it's like if it happens, it's like it's its own proof of destiny. But what it is like when human beings forget they're being human beings. That's like a dangerous inner extinction event. But really, to remain as human beings, we need a vision of our future. And so whoever you are, the future is the space where your imagination can move. The future is how far your imagination or your inner vision can access. So when you wonder about your eyes, you realize you're poetically being the sky of the inner realms, watching the world at once, you know? To discover one's unknown presence, you know, in the karma of a known world. It's like we discovered our spirit beyond the earth, you know. It's as if something within evolution has made man surpass the atmosphere of the planet. Something is calling us, like the sky is calling the children of the earth. You know, they say Mother Earth, Father Sky in like ancient mythology. So it's kind of like, you know, we have been the children of Mother Earth, but now Father Sky is calling us. And what is the sky a suggestion of? It's a suggestion of where the activity of humanity will go, which is another way of saying the sky is the future. So it's kind of like the body is the child of the sky, like space and matter, but the mind is the child of the, you could say, past and future. That's the axis of the mind, time. Every person's governing factor of reality is time. But if there is a possibility that we can pinpoint the body in time, because the mind creates the concept of time, but how can we pinpoint the mind in time? So when we discover an unknown moment where attention and existence are instantaneously being true, it's like what other proof for divinity does there need to be other than that there's something happening in the middle of nowhere? Like it's as if somebody wonders, what does non-existence owe to existence? And hilariously, it's as if existence arises from the spaces of non-existence, you know? It's as if before the world was the world was being the potential of the world, you know? And before human beings, the advanced humanity arises, it's like we have to be advanced before advancement finds us, you know? caring for the advancement of humanity is a great purpose. And it's a purpose where we need 8 billion explorers in an unknown world to efficiently re-strategize the geometry of reality. The story of the world can be way more advanced than it is. The mind is an unknown multidimensional being. The body is a known singular biological being. And the moment is unknown beyond any concept that passes through it. Anyways, thanks for listening, and if this episode is being heard in the future, thank you for listening. Much blessings and namaste. Rise, mankind, rise.